Hi, so today I am delighted to have Jason Grunberg, the new CMO of Bluecore, a trailblazer in retail marketing technology. Jason has over 2 decades of experience, including client side roles at Sailthru and Marigold, and agency side at firms like The Mix and DC3. Jason has a reputation for spearheading customer centric initiatives and introducing groundbreaking retail programs. Now he's at the helm of Bluecore's marketing, driving growth and relevancy. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here and excited to chat today about a few things in my background and what I'm thinking about as a CMO.
Yeah, that's great. So that's a great place to begin. Let's talk about that background. And can you share a little bit, give us a glimpse into your upbringing, maybe your education, and any significant early life experiences that really kind of shaped who you are today?
Yeah, I think it was like a freshman in high school. I for some reason picked journalism as that like thing for me that I really latched onto. So I joined the high school newspaper. I was doing high school yearbook. I started freelancing for a local newspaper in New Jersey and spent those 4 years in high school really focused on that and ended up being accepted into the Newhouse School at Syracuse University. Studied magazine journalism and public policy, thinking I wanted to be a political correspondent. And I love that the foundational education there because something I feel like isn't often connected is that the journalistic mindset and the strategic mindset I think are very similar. You have to learn deeply about a topic. You have to make sense of a lot of information, figure out what's important and specifically what's important to a particular audience, and then determine how to communicate that. And whether you're in journalism or in strategy, I do see there being a lot of overlap, and that ended up being a large part of what I used really in my career on the agency side. But I never ended up becoming a political correspondent. I spent like 1 week in politics and decided it wasn't for me. So I guess 8 years between high school and university, in a bit of a misdirection, but I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't had that experience. So that was really my focus and hopes and dreams.
Yeah, interesting. So journalism career. Um, Early on, whether that be kind of in high school or even before, I mean, were there any sort of early indications? Did you gravitate towards marketing? Did you have a lemonade stand? Tell us about anything that maybe looking back now is like, oh yeah, I see where how I landed where I landed.
My both of my parents were entrepreneurs. They both started their own businesses, and they both for a long time were working out of the house. And I think as a kid, that was a little bit annoying, right? Like they were always there. You didn't have the sense of freedom, and they were using 2 rooms in our house as their offices, and it was like you had to be quiet around those. But seeing both of them on that journey, and I think understanding that they wore every hat, right? Like it wasn't. They were sole practitioners to begin with. My father ended up really building quite a large company and was very lucky in his pursuits on that. And so I got to see that journey and understand, I think, I had more of a glimpse into what it was like to start and run an organization. And I think that ended up impacting a lot on me or kind of shaping that worldview that I had. And when I was graduating from college, even though was looking at pursuing journalism, I had this moment of fear of like, what if in 10 or 15 years this isn't going to be for me anymore? This isn't what I want to do. Do I have any other skills? And how do I diversify those to kind of stave off that midlife crisis that I'm already thinking that I'm going to be having, or quarter life crisis probably at that point? But I think that ended up putting me on the path. And so, what was really native for me was the idea of selling because both my mother and father were doing that as part of their businesses. So I took a job right out of college as in business development. So I had to make 100 cold calls a day before I left my desk, and it was pretty brutal. Like the pendulum swinging from wanting to be a political correspondent to dialing for dollars was quite a swing. And I, for some reason, instinctively started interviewing at marketing agencies and small firms that I think we're looking for somebody that could wear multiple hats rather than the large agency kind of swim lane based organization. And it really just clicked. I got calls back from a number of firms and was able to choose one that I felt was right for me. And they kind of took the attitude of like, oh, you can write and you can sell, welcome to marketing. And I knew already, I was like, well, I don't think that's true, but okay, like I'll take this and use this experience. So I think really seeing my parents in that entrepreneurial mindset was really shaping for me. And I still think about that today.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, no, it's, I have a young daughter as well, and having her around, working from home, I can definitely see the wheels turning in her head as well. So that's great. This is a great story. Thank you for sharing that. I got to ask, was there pressure from your dad or even your mom to go into the family business? Was that sort of an expectation at all?
So the that first job in selling was at my dad's company.
Okay.
And I was pretty miserable. And it was, I think, for a few reasons. Like I got treated differently than everybody else did, not in a positive way. He and his partners were incredibly hard on me. If anything went wrong, like I would be kind of made an example of. And I think because they were really sensitive to the nepotism factor there. Um, and I grew up as a competitive tennis player. And so it was like a year into being in that job. I was lucky enough to go to the US Open finals to see Andy Roddick win. And I walked away from that actually being up, like kind of depressed because I felt like I just seen this 18-year-old reach the pinnacle of his career. And that, like, where does he go from there? And I remember speaking to my dad about it the next day, and he was like, well, where are you in that journey? And I just broke down into tears, like in his office. And I was like, I'm miserable. Like, I can't keep doing this. I don't want to do this. This isn't for me. And he was like, look, like start looking for another job. Like I'll give you about 3 months to find something and transition out. And you go from there. And I think that again, like I'll never forget like the office I was sitting in, like the color of the walls and like the orientation because it was just such an emotional moment. But there was that pressure, and we, pretty quickly determined that this was not going to be the future of it. And I think both accepted that, and we're able to move on from it, which was good.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, and glad to hear your dad was supportive, of the move. I've heard of other stories. I think we all have where it wasn't that necessarily the case. So, thanks for that. As you had mentioned, much of your career early on was actually working at agencies, the Mix, DC3, and then you had moved into at Sailthru and started actually as, from what I understand, a content marketing manager, and moved your way up to VP of marketing and then eventually CMO. Uh, what do you contribute this great career accelerated growth that you had?
A lot of it to the agency experience, and in particular for me, the small agency experience where I was given a lot of authority and autonomy. I was managing teams by the time I was 24, and I was really over my skis in it. I remember there was an interaction with somebody that was reporting into me who was much more tenured, and I made her cry in the office. And somebody took me aside who was more, again, also more tenured, and was like, hey, you've got a lot of talent, but you've got to reel in the attitude side of it. And like being a manager is different than being a leader. And you need to understand that those things are very different. You can't force people to follow you. You have to pave that path and kind of lead people proactively. And so, but the ability to wear multiple hats and kind of try out different parts of marketing. And I worked at a few different agencies. The first one was really specialized in the spirits industry, and we did a lot of work around promotional marketing, product launch, and activation in individual markets. And then I moved to an agency with the Mix that was really focused on branding and design. And I got to work in pharmaceutical, I got to work in entertainment and automobile, financial services, and get a real sense for what these different industries were about. And but through a very different lens in the agency experience. And the head of strategy at the mix broke off, started her own firm, which was Tilden Marketing, which later was a collaboration with Tilden DC3, and she really taught me a tremendous amount about core strategy functions, because it wasn't really a design centric organization. It truly was a like branding, marketing, and communication strategy firm. That's where I got to work with high technology companies like Verizon and Siemens and other organizations that are kind of similar. And so small agencies, big clients, big work. And from there, moving into the client side at Sailthru, I actually did it as I thought I was going to do it for 2 years. I wanted to go client side to get that experience to then go back to the agency side with that different perspective. And so as I look back on things, it really was always a hunt for perspective. How can I round out my thinking? How do I try a different form of marketing? How do I dive into that so that I can feel more whole in terms of how I process information and the way that I can think through challenges that a client had. And obviously it stuck. I think it was 8 years into being on the client side that I kept calling it client side. Somebody was like, you need to stop saying that. Like, you're officially here. And so this is where you are and where you operate. So you're an operator, and just go with that. So it really was the variety of the experience, I think. And I don't know if I was actively pursuing it. I like to think so, but my guidance to anybody who's young in their career is really shaped by that, where I would say to people, be active in the pursuit of new knowledge. And if you are only looking for the title and the pay jump, you're actually going to shut yourself off from what the totality of your future can look like. And I was around the same comp level for 8 to 10 years in my 20s. It wasn't until I really was in my 30s that started to change for me. And I think it's because I sacrificed compensation, I sacrificed title for the experiences that I wanted to have. And that helped really put me on the trajectory of where I am today.
Yeah, no, that's great advice, and love the hunt for perspective. That sounds like a book title that could be in your future there.
One day, I'll write that one down, man.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so I want to shift gears a little bit because you had said something that really caught my eye. I had read you had mentioned that you have an approach that you call relationship demand chain, a demand gen chain, relationship demand gen chain. Would love to know a little bit more about that. Can you share more about that with us?
Yeah. Well, first, I, as a marketer and somebody that is in board meetings, I always need to come up with titles like that for frameworks, so that it feels like it's maybe something bigger than what it is. But this is, to me, a simple approach of you need to have a point of view. You need to have points of entry for a prospect or a target audience member to engage with those points of view. You need to turn that into points of leverage, and then from points of leverage into points of conversion. And I think, especially in B2B, so many organizations focus on points of conversion, which to me is the last step in the process. And when you look at all of the research that exists out there of the buyer journey, it's not a sales process. It's not it doesn't begin when somebody becomes a lead or an opportunity. It begins a long time before that. And so this to me is kind of the difference between demand gen and lead gen, where a lot of organizations speak about the two as if they're interchangeable, and they're just not. Demand gen is much bigger in terms of its scope and what it does in the marketplace and what you put in the marketplace. It's big picture content. It might be very large activations that drive brand awareness and change brand sentiment, whatever it might be. And then you move people through a chain of events that are all aimed at building a relationship with that individual, because people buy from people. It's not a company buying from a company. And so I think my job in marketing, the way I say it internally, is my job is to get sales reps paid. And if you're a marketer and you're not thinking about who your internal customer is, I think you're missing a large part of the picture. So I exist for my sales team to get checks, and the way I do that is by helping them build relationships. And so if I think backwards from that, it's what's the chain of events that is going to best set that up? And we need to have a point of view on the marketplace that we're existing in, and that is relative to our targets. We need to distribute those points of view where they are or in places where they're engaged with it. That's typically, content marketing. And then we need to set up points of leverage, which are typically events for us or community. And we're diving a lot more into the community side of things. There's a lot of buzz around the idea of CLG, or community led growth versus product led growth. And then points of conversion, which are, bigger types of meetings for us, not just like the initial nice to meet you type thing, for us to have the framework or the scaffolding for our reps to really build relationships and for marketing to be a conduit for that.
Yeah, that's great. No, I love that, and very in tune with what we advise our clients on. We call it relationship making, is kind of
Okay.
the term that we tried to coin, but very similar type of concept. How do you uh, build awareness first and foremost, create that demand, and start relationships with prospects who don't know who you are. And it's not a linear process. And there are the whole chain of events, as you had mentioned, varies from prospect to prospect. But how do you do so at a level of some scale as well? Because it's going to take that, and it's not going to happen overnight. And you have to build that relationship, and then you have to nurture that relationship, over time. So yeah, really resonated. Thanks for sharing that. I have to ask as well, because we have a lot of agencies that listen and read our materials here, and I know they've expressed, a lot of them, that they would like to go client side, at some point. Curious if you have any advice for those that are maybe thinking about that.
So I took a title change, and that, like, it was a step back. I was head of strategy on the agency side, and again, small agencies, so that's relative, right? And I think on the client side, I would equate that to like a senior director or VP level, and I took a step back to a senior manager level, and so that was where the opportunity was. It also gave me the ability to go in without having ever been on the client side before. Like, there's operating mentalities and politics and things that I think that are different between both sides, and so it gave me the ability to get familiar with that. And I had a few colleagues in the nearly 10 years that I was at Sailthru, CM Group, Marigold, who would be like, "You have been promoted so often, so quickly. Like, what's your secret?" And I would say, I was like, I came in 2 to 3 steps lower. So, like, if you look at it from that perspective and normalize it, I really haven't been that advanced. I just got back to where I was. And that, for me, I think you got to be okay with that. And you look at it as an opportunity to fly under the radar and figure out where you're best going to fit, and play chess versus checkers in all of it, and be smart. Because I think going in and just assuming that you can take the agency side experience and direct translate into the same level client side doesn't necessarily work. And I think we see it when you're on the agency side and it's somebody from the client side who comes in, who thinks that they're this big kind of like role and big person. And they find out that, like, they had no idea what it was like to operate on the agency side, and they fail in it. And so I would say be comfortable taking the step back. There was also a part of it where just culturally, there was a really big difference in how people gave feedback. Like, the agency side, like, you're all comfortable with crit. Like, it's just a part of life there, right? Where your work gets critiqued and criticized, and you do it openly and unemotionally, where it's just all about like what's going to be the best product. And sure, you defend your work and all those things, and you've got rationale, but it's about what's best for the customer and what's best for their audience in the end. That same level of comfort does not exist on the client side. And so that was the largest culture shock for me, where we'd go into a meeting and I'd be like, well, this is, I know, like, this is not the right approach here. My perspective is X, Y, and Z based on what we're trying to do. And people would just be flabbergasted that I was that openly criticizing of a colleague's work. And it took me a while to reframe. And my wife works in HR, and she was kind of like, yeah, like you gotta stop that. Like that's the people are gonna really dislike you. And I was like, well, what am I supposed to do? And she's like, you make it their idea. You say something like that. Oh, like that's an incredible idea. Like I feel like what you're saying is this. Like, what if like we did X, Y, and Z? And I'm like, oh, I have to be political and soft. She's like, it's not political. It's just like you have to bring people along with you because no one openly criticizes on the client side. And I think I've gotten much better at that. I don't know that I'm still where I should be, but that was to me the most significant culture shock. Besides the acronyms, which is just always amazing to me, the volume of acronyms that companies use and are comfortable with.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, definitely. And I've certainly heard that before. And I'm sure maybe the Brooklyn in you also maybe comes out a little bit, huh?
Well, and now that I'm in Raleigh, every time I say y'all, it just still sounds like a bagel's coming out of my mouth. And I'm like, okay, we'll
There you
see,
go.
maybe one day.
Awesome. So yeah, let's obviously we've talked a little bit about Bluecore, but love to know a little bit more, especially for those that aren't familiar, with the company. Tell us about Bluecore. Tell us about what your role, what some of your initial initiatives are. That'd be great.
Yeah. So I as background, I kind of come from the MarTech space, spent a lot of time in campaign management, and Marigold has like Sailthru, Cheetah Digital, Selligent, Live Clicker, Campaign Monitor, and a number of other technology companies. And um, moving over to Bluecore really happened because I'd spent a lot of time with Sailthru focused on retail and marketing to, selling into, and helping manage our customers because my last role at Marigold was as general manager of Sailthru. And Bluecore is a marketing technology company that does identification and customer movement only for enterprise retailers. So we're working with the likes of Gap and Nike and Alo Yoga and Noble. And a ton of really exciting brands that are in the retail space and leaders in it in the US and globally. And the value of Bluecore is that we help take anonymous shoppers on the website, turn them into known, and then move them through the purchase funnel repeatedly. So they're generating repeat purchases. And we like to think we do this better than any like customer data solution in the retail stack. So we really are on the data and data activation side of things. Focus on event triggered marketing and whatnot. But it's a really exciting opportunity because I believe that this MarTech market is so crowded to the point where um, organizations really need specialists. If you're a B2C brand, you might have foundational technologies that are horizontal and that they are for everybody. But on top of that, you need to put industry or vertical specific technologies because even when you look at what's happening with AI right now, if I'm in the retail space, I want to partner with somebody that has models that are specifically built for retail versus those that are built to meet the needs of every single industry because retail is very different than media. Media is very different than, say, automotive and things along those lines or financial services. And so Bluecore is vertical specific, only going after that enterprise retail. And that was a large part of why I was attracted to it. Not only it being connected to some of the roles that I've had in the past, but from a where I'm focused perspective, it is really bringing to life that retail expertise that we have throughout the buyer journey. I think Bluecore has been somewhat like retail generic in its marketing and in its sales processes. And so what we're going through right now is a bit of an overhaul to that marketing strategy, how we partner with our prospect organizations, really bringing the retail strategy expertise that we have to light. There's often times where I'm invited to speak somewhere and I'm like, nope, I'm not going to do that. Like I'm going to put like our head of strategy up for that because that's the important voice to be in the marketplace who has credibility rather than me listening to my own voice. But just making decisions like that so that we're kind of viewed as that like archetypal sage in the marketplace where we have the knowledge and we're ready to impart this wisdom in a really kind of like easy, non-confrontational way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, sounds like a very exciting opportunity for you and fits very well with your background. Curious to know, like, what are some of the KPIs then that you're responsible for in your role?
So I believe that marketing should do two things. One, at the macro level, we want to look at LTV to CAC. So, like, what's the total lifetime value of a customer that we bring in against the cost of acquisition? And we want to be looking at CAC to bookings. And so, the cost of acquisition ratio with like what did we book in terms of new business or expanded business within a specific time frame. To me, LTV to CAC is the annual. Time horizon that you're looking at this and tracking, and sure, you'll look at it like within the individual quarters. That gives you like in the long term, are you making the right decisions? Whereas CAC to bookings tells you like in the very near term, are those decisions also paying off? And you want to balance the two of them because you need to be booking business every quarter, but you also want to look at the health of the business that you are booking. Does it stay retained or does it leave after 1 year? And so what does that tell you about the channels through which you invest? Outside of those two metrics, I think the metrics need to be custom to the strategy. And so for us, where we're becoming more and more invested in the points of view side and points of entry side, this is where we are shifting from looking at like traditional like MQLs or marketing qualified leads and SQOs, sales qualified opportunities, to those, how do we measure those points of entry? And so we're putting our retail thought leaders out into the marketplace more and more. And so we're looking at their social profiles and their media presence versus Bluecore's because they are a conduit to actually get people to Bluecore. So the product brand itself or the company brand matters less than the people brands right now. And so we're focused on that. We're focused on how do those engagements relate to growing the community that we've launched with a specific set of events that are targeted towards executives and others that are targeted to more managerial levels within our target organization. So how do we convert from those points of entry into those points of leverage at the events? And then from there, how do those convert into really at those points of conversion, us getting real business meetings out of it? And so what does that, again, relationship demand gen chain look like at every step? That's where those specific channels are really important to us.
Yeah, yeah, interesting. So that's a good segue into my next question I wanted to ask you about is, where do you see the future of marketing in this sector going? And you've, I think, hinted upon some of your thoughts here with this whole idea of community. So I'd love for you maybe to expand upon that a little bit and how you're thinking about community and events, maybe at a little bit of deeper level.
Yeah, this has really been shaped by the agency experience where I chose to go B2B versus B2C because I just felt like there was nothing but opportunity in B2B to differentiate by thinking about the business buyer as a consumer. And I feel like this is a topic that's been written about endlessly for the last 20 or 30 years, where these are people buying from people. And so many MarTech companies and broader SaaS, they focus on the product and the features and the widget. And they're so led from a product perspective, but I don't really see where there's significant product moat anymore. And so many of them have misconstrued the idea of like what it is to build a real brand. How do you like invest in that and that conversation that your organization has with the broader market? And so I think we're starting to see that take shape in technology where organizations that are really focusing on brand are being successful. And I would say like Salesforce is one of them has proven that where it's like Salesforce versus Oracle, like there's a feeling of working with Salesforce, engaging with that. That is consistent. I don't love it personally, but like it is works for them. You look at organizations like Braze, where Braze really invested in from transition, renaming and fully rebranding from Appboy to Braze. They've been wildly successful in their growth. And so my goal is that we can do that here at Bluecore and that other organizations are going to do it because it's not just about the brand really. It's are you emotionally focused or are you functionally focused? And are you really building a connection with an audience and building that audience? And that's demand gen from my perspective versus just building and converting leads, which is functional in nature. And so I think the ones that really stand out are going to be the ones where it's people like myself and others that have come from agency and B2C are shaping more of the narrative on the B2B side, because it's so needed and so necessary. And there's so much opportunity for it.
Yeah, yeah, it really is. Seems to be a blue ocean still, in this market. So definitely, I know a lot of our listeners here are either already working with some B2B clients, or they'd like to get more into B2B, especially on the tech side. What insights or lessons might you share with them for those that want to break into that industry and win clients in the space?
I think that and I've experienced this multiple times as I've wanted to be focused on brand versus just like the product marketing and lead generation. There's hesitation to it from a executive perspective and from a board perspective, because it's like, well, how do we measure it? Well, when does it show up in the funnel? Where are those basic things? And so I really wanted to go into Sailthru and now like Bluecore with, okay, like here's the full process, like here's the work that we're going to go through, and it's big work, it's great work, it's going to set that foundation, and it's going to take us 6 months to a year to get to a point where we have that right foundation, and then we're going to do X, Y, and Z. That just doesn't fly. Because it's such a break from how they operate today that you have to find ways to take your experience and your thought process and make it more approachable and digestible, and where there are kind of like checks in that process to say, okay, this is where we're going to see this set of results. And with that, we're going to invest more and move on. And this is what's going to come next. And so you need to make it incremental from a process and from a results perspective, and have real alignment on the measures, because most organizations, like I can't go to my CFO and say like, oh, like, in 2 years time, we're going to run some brand awareness and sentiment studies and just like see how we did. That doesn't work for her. It doesn't work for the board. It's got to be, all right, we're going to do these things. We're going to start seeing green shoots in this 6 to 9 month period. And that's going to be the signal that we've invested. And so I think over the last 10 plus years, what's really evolved for me is thinking more deeply about how do we test our way into doing really big work versus how do we do really big work and then like find out what it did later. And so as part of, if you're going from agency side to client side, you need to reframe that thinking. And if you're pitching these types of organizations, especially now in this economy, that's part of the attitude and outlook that you need to have. It's not just, oh, like here's the year-long project. It's got to be, well, why don't we operate with intelligence here and say, let's do these things that are going to test and build the business case for the big work. And if you can do that and change your process to be reflective of that, I think you're more likely to land a lot more clients a lot easier, because it's a lower lift and lower investment at the beginning.
Yeah, no, that's really smart. And we work in a similar way with our clients. We like to do things in 30-day sprints. At the end of the 30 days, you see what's working, what's not. You dial up what is, you pull back on what isn't, and you just constantly keep iterating. But you look at these as like 30-day, at least with us, 30-day experiments. So yeah, that really resonates. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
Curious about you come from the agency world, curious about your team that you have there. Are you working with any external agencies, and in what capacity?
Yeah, so we're a relatively small team, and right now, and I've been here for 4 months. We did make some partner changes at the beginning, just with folks that I've worked with very closely in the past, and I tend to lean towards consultants initially, to then potentially move to full agency, again, because let's take that approach of like, let's test to see if this works and kind of expand from there. That said, we are partnered up on the agency side from a performance marketing perspective when it comes to everything that is search based, display, and things along those lines. My model tends to be strategy in-house as much as possible, execution out of house as much as possible. And so that takes like shape in a few different ways. Like we typically don't use a like design agency. We work with freelancers who all kind of act like a team, but we can use them as spike resources. We can spike up the work that we have with them or scale it down. We'll work with copy freelancers. We're able to do the same thing, but there are aspects of the program. And I think especially as we look forward into some of the activations that we want to get off the ground, we really need agency level support in it versus individual level. And so I'm excited for us to get to the place where there are three particular activations that we have in mind for specific parts of our audience that we're going to be looking for agency partners on. Some of it is like digital experiential. Some of it is like research and then like launch and experiences around that research. And then the last one is like very much so on the video storytelling side of things. And so interested in potential folks out there who specialize in those areas. But it's that big work where you really need a strong creative partner and somebody that's going to do like the full heavy lifting of everything for you and check in with you that we're starting to get to, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that's great. Well, thank you for sharing that. So a lot of work ahead. You're only 4 months in. It sounds like you've accomplished a lot, but I know a lot ahead of you as well. The market is changing, so quickly here. I'm curious, what do? You mentioned earlier the hunt for perspective. How do you stay on top of trends and everything that's happening, in the market?
Yeah, I a few years ago I started doing something called demo days, where typically once a quarter I reserve an entire day out of my schedule just to take demos and take conversations. So I don't respond to every email that I get, but I read every single one, and that oftentimes just gets me more and more email from that same person. But eventually I will respond. But I typically set aside this day a quarter where I will respond to somebody where it's something that's of interest to me. And I'll say, that's great. Like I've got a demo day set up, in 2 months. These are the time slots still available. And generally speaking, I will tell them like, this is your time to use as you wish. I would recommend that you don't use this time qualifying me because I'm not necessarily in a buying cycle. I'm more in a like learn and discovery phase. So I want to know more about your company, what you do, how you do it. And I'll spend 30 minutes with 6 to 8 potential partners on that day. And then, I'll move on to the next. And so that means a few different things for me. One, it helps me stay on top of like what's happening in the marketplace. Two, it helps me really see like what's out there, not just from a pitch, not just from like a website perspective or from a media perspective. And then I encourage my team to do the same thing, and we'll kind of come together and be like, this is who we talked to, this is what we saw or whatnot. And that's been really helpful just in keeping people like leveled up.
Yeah, no, I love that demo days. Yeah, we've run across that, with working on behalf of some of our clients. So it's really, really smart, as I think there is a lot of out there. So I think carving out some time for that seems a way to manage it. Because if you took every meeting with everybody, it's certainly you wouldn't get any work done.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you don't want to be so closed-minded that you're missing out on some really great insights that might be out there. So really smart. So Jason, we're just about at time here. Is there anything that you wish I would have asked or wanted me to ask that maybe we haven't gotten to?
One of the things that I've been focused on recently is this idea of time horizons, and I'm just starting to formulate some ideas on it. But it just comes to like management, and if you're a leader of a team, and you're thinking about shape of a team, or you're thinking about your own life as an individual contributor, I feel like we focus on hierarchies so much in organizations versus the time horizon somebody looks after. And so, again, just kind of like shaping my ideas on this, but I'm starting to talk to my team about like my time horizon is 36 months. I need to have a plan for this business over 3 years and where we're going and what we're doing. I need my VP to have a time horizon that's 12 to 18 months. Like, what exactly are we executing in that time period? And we're doing it the right way. Her directs need to be looking after like a 6-month time horizon, their directs a 3-month time horizon. Like, does it add up in a way where like we are not driving a cruise ship like a speedboat, where things are just going to fall off? Does it give them that connection to the bigger piece? And so I think that's just kind of like my parting word here is like maybe consider that. in management, but also like I think it's great if you're on the agency side and you're looking to understand somebody's perspective, asking them about like their time horizon and like what time horizon are they focused on impacting and what do they think they need to do in that and where are they on that journey? I think it's just a great discovery question because I'm oftentimes not asked. People are like, "What's your most pressing issue right now?" I'm like, I don't care about that. What I care about is what's going to impact me 2 to 3 years from now that I'm not already thinking about. And if you can add value to me in that conversation, I want to talk to you.
Yeah, what a great way to end this time horizon. So, for our listeners that want to stay on top of what you're doing at Bluecore and follow you, and maybe as you develop more thoughts on this idea of time horizons, where's the best place to go?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. I post pretty frequently. It's Jason Grunberg. You can also just shoot me an email, jason.grunberg, Grunberg, at bluecore.com. Like I said, I read every email. So I guess this will be the test if that's truly true.
Great. All right, Jason. Thank you so much. This has been really insightful. Good luck in your new role. Look forward to following you.
Thank you. And thank you so much for having me.